Welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Singularity, where humanity never backs down. Subscribe, and let the story begin. Commander Tessic Vroll had given the same lecture 11 times, and every single time, the humans made it worse. The Carvex 9 storm season, he said, gesturing at the swirling orange smear on the holographic display, is not a metaphor. It is not a challenge to be overcome through grit, determination, or whatever inspirational nonsense your species prints on motivational posters. It is death. Rapid, efficient, and indifferent. 23 cadets stood in loose formation under the training dome. 19 of them were Threll, tall and blue-gray and appropriately solemn. Nodding along like this was the most reasonable thing they'd ever heard, because it was. The remaining 4 were human. 3 of those humans were nodding too, mostly out of politeness. The 4th was picking sand out of his boot. Cadet Okafor, Tessic said, in the tone of someone who already regretted asking. Do you have a question? Marcus Okafor looked up, mid-shake of his boot. Yeah. Does the storm come with a warning siren, or do we just find out we're dead when we stop being alive? A ripple of discomfort went through the Threll cadets. Tessic's throat crest flushed a pale, irritated violet, which was the Threll equivalent of a vein bulging in someone's forehead. There is a siren, he said tightly. Cool. So we get advance notice of the death. That's basically a warranty. I feel great about this now. This is not a joke, Cadet. I know, Marcus said, not unkindly. I just process fear through humor. It's a whole human thing. You'll get used to it. Or you won't, and that's also fine. Tessic did not get used to it. He'd had 6 weeks of joint training with the human contingent and he had not gotten used to a single thing about them, the way they laughed at inappropriate moments, the way they slept through mandatory briefings and somehow still passed the follow-up exams, the way they treated mortal danger like a minor scheduling inconvenience. He was fairly certain this attitude was going to get one of them killed. He did not expect to be right within the hour. The siren went off 11 minutes into the field exercise, which, Marcus would later note, was somehow both exactly on schedule and catastrophically too late. 1 second the sky over the training basin was its usual sick orange, streaked with the kind of high, thin clouds that looked more like scratches than weather. The next second, the horizon simply vanished behind a wall of moving sand that stretched from the ground to somewhere well past where Marcus's neck was comfortable craning. That's new, he said. Move, Tessic bellowed, and for once nobody needed a second invitation. The shelter pods were 400 meters back toward the ridge, which under normal circumstances was a pleasant 7-minute walk. Under these circumstances, it was 7 minutes that the storm did not intend to give them. The wind hit first, not a gust, but a wall, the kind of pressure that made you understand, suddenly and personally, why the training manual used the word structural to describe what it did to buildings. Then came the sand, and then came something the manual had absolutely failed to mention. The air itself started to crackle, hairline threads of blue-white static arcing between grains of sand like the storm was assembling its own miniature lightning out of spare parts. Marcus's comm unit died between one step and the next, screen flickering into a dead gray rectangle mid-sentence. That's not great, he said to no one, because no one could hear him anymore anyway. Visibility dropped to arm's length. He kept moving in the direction he was fairly sure was the ridge, hands out in front of him like a man playing blind man's bluff with a planet that was actively trying to kill him, and that was when he tripped over something that groaned. The something was Vex Therrell, a Threll cadet from his squad, down on one knee with a limb bent at an angle that limbs were not supposed to bend, sand already piling against her side like the storm was trying to bury her on a schedule. Get up, Marcus shouted, or tried to, the wind ate most of it. Legs broken, Vex shouted back. Go. I'll signal for her. Nobody's getting a signal through this. Get up. I can't. Not asking. Marcus got a shoulder under her arm and hauled, and whatever he lacked in the raw dense bone strength the Threll liked to advertise, he made up for in sheer bloody-minded refusal to leave a teammate face down in a planet-sized sandblaster. They staggered together, half his weight, half hers, both of them blind, both of them breathing grit. The ridge did not appear. What appeared, looming suddenly out of the orange nothing like a building made of spite, was something enormous, dark, and curved, ribbed like a barrel and easily 4 stories tall, its surface catching what little light made it through the storm in dull, waxy gleams. "What is that?" Marcus said. "Drevathorn," Vex gasped. Don't touch it, it's not." "Does it have a door?" "It doesn't have a door, it's a plant, it's not a building, Okafor, it will digest you." Marcus was already dragging them both toward a dark seam low on the thing's flank, a fold in the waxy hide that looked, to his sand-blasted and increasingly unreasonable eyes, exactly like an entrance. "Everything on this planet is trying to kill us anyway," he shouted. "Might as well pick the one that looks cozy." Okafor. The fold gave way under his shoulder like a curtain, warm and slightly damp and smelling of something green and mineral, and then they were inside, and the storm was a distant roar instead of a personal assault, and Marcus Okafor, cadet, human, and apparently out of good decisions, sat down in the dark with an injured alien in his lap and thought, well, at least it's out of the wind, and then, with the specific and infuriating talent that humans seem to have for falling asleep at the worst possible moments, passed out cold. Rescue arrived 18 hours later. Director Asa Kryn had seen storm damage before. She had not seen anything like this. The training basin looked less like it had weathered bad weather and more like something had picked it up, shaken it, and set it back down at a slightly wrong angle. 3 of the 4 shelter pods were crushed flat, the 4th was simply gone, and the comm relay tower had been folded over so neatly it looked almost intentional, like a piece of alien origami nobody had asked for. "Life signs," she said into her wrist unit, already knowing the answer and asking anyway, because that was the job. "Scanning," her second replied. A long pause. "Too long." "Negative, Director. No life signs in the primary camp radius." "Cadets?" 23 deployed. 0 located." Asa closed her eyes for exactly 1 second, which was as much grief as the situation allowed her to budget right now, and opened them again. "Expand the search radius. All of it. I want every centimeter of that basin scanned before I report this to Fleet." She got her expanded search. She got, 4 hours later, 17 bodies, recovered with the grim efficiency of people who had done this before and hoped never to do it again. She got, disturbingly, no bodies at all for the remaining 6, 3 Threll, 3 human, a fact that her second helpfully pointed out could mean they were simply buried too deep to register, or could mean something the storm had done to them made registering impossible in the first place, neither of which Asa found comforting. She radioed Fleet Command with the number anyway, because the number was the number. "Confirmed," she said, flat and professional and quietly furious at the universe. 17 recovered, presumed deceased. 6 unaccounted for, presumed the same. 0 survivors located. 0. As in none. As in, if Command was hoping for a smaller number, I don't have one to give you. It was the drone on the 3rd sweep that found the heat signature. It was faint, barely a flicker against the ambient temperature of the basin, and it was coming from inside the Drevathorn on the northern slope, a thing so large it had shown up on the original site survey as a geological feature before someone corrected the file. "That's not possible," her second said, staring at the readout like it had personally insulted him. "Nothing survives inside a Drevathorn. It's not shelter, it's a stomach with a nice paint job." "Cut it open," Asa said. "Director, if there's remains in there, cutting it open is going to be." "I am aware of what cutting open a digestive organ is going to be like, Lieutenant." "Do it anyway." They did it anyway. It took 2 of them and a plasma cutter and a great deal of unpleasant, wet sound, and Asa stood a respectful and clinically necessary distance back with her jaw tight, bracing for the kind of sight that ended up in reports nobody enjoyed writing. What she got instead, when the wall finally split and warm, humid air rolled out into the desert evening, was a Thrall cadet, alive, blinking, filthy, splinted leg propped awkwardly against the plant's fibrous inner wall, and, curled against her side using her uninjured shoulder as a pillow, one very asleep human. Nobody said anything for a moment. The wind, for once, had the decency to stay quiet too. "Is he," Asa's second said slowly, "is he sleeping?" "He's sleeping," Vex Thrall confirmed, in the exhausted voice of someone who had spent the last 18 hours coming to terms with this exact fact. "He's been sleeping for 6 hours. I have tried everything. I do not think it can be woken. I think it can only be released, like a trap. We are inside the digestive cavity of an apex predator plant," Asa said, mostly to herself, mostly because she needed to hear it out loud to believe it, "and the human is asleep." "Yes, Director." "Is he injured?" Vex considered this with the weary precision of a field report she'd clearly been composing in her head for hours. "Minor abrasions. Chemical irritation to exposed skin, consistent with partial enzymatic exposure." He complained about it for approximately 4 minutes and then stopped complaining and went to sleep instead. He went to sleep. Inside the thing that was actively trying to digest him. "Director, I would like it noted in the official record that I also find this deeply unreasonable. They got Marcus out, carefully, given the enzyme burns, and given that nobody was entirely sure what would happen if you startled a sleeping human out of a giant carnivorous cactus, and it was not until they had him on a stretcher, blinking up at 4 extremely relieved and extremely confused faces, that he said anything useful at all. "Is breakfast ready?" he said. Nobody had a good answer for that. Medical bay smelled like antiseptic and, faintly, still, like the inside of the Drevathorn, which nobody had quite managed to scrub off Marcus's boots yet. He sat on the edge of a diagnostic bed while a Thrall doctor ran a scanner over him for the 4th time, muttering things in a tone that suggested the scanner was lying to her. "Your dermal readings suggest exposure to digestive enzymes consistent with a lethal dose," the doctor said. "Felt more like a bad sunburn," Marcus said. "Itchy. 10 out of 10 do not recommend. You should be dead." "I get that a lot, apparently." Vex, leg now properly set and encased in a brace, sat in the next bed over, watching this exchange with the specific fascination of someone assembling a case study. "It's the smell," she offered. "The Drevathorn hunts by scent signature. It reads organic matter, calculates nutritional value, adjusts its enzymatic output accordingly. Thrall register as prey. Efficiently." "And humans?" the doctor asked. "Humans," Vex said, "register as something between spoiled meat and a chemical spill." It didn't know what to do with him. "I believe, and I want this in the report exactly as I say it, that the Drevathorn was as confused as the rest of us. So it just gave up. It reduced enzymatic output to conserve energy on a food source it could not efficiently process," Vex said. "In Thrall terms, this is called retreating. In human terms, I believe Cadet Okafor referred to it as, and again I want this exact phrasing preserved, it ghosted him." Marcus grinned. "Solid burn, big guy plant included." The door hissed open and Tessic Vroll walked in, throat crest doing something complicated that Marcus had learned, over 6 weeks, roughly translated to a Thrall trying very hard to look like he hadn't been worried. "Cadet Okafor," Tessic said, stiffly. "I am pleased to see you alive." "Bet you are." Would have been an awkward report. "Human died exactly as predicted, please see attached I told you so." Tessic's crest flushed violet again, but this time it looked less like irritation and more like something closer to embarrassment. "I may have underestimated certain aspects of human resilience. You called us fragile in front of the whole squad. I recall the lecture, Cadet. I slept inside a carnivorous cactus for 6 hours and the worst thing that happened to me was a rash. I am aware, Cadet. Just want to make sure it's on the record. For posterity. And possibly a t-shirt. Tessic made a sound that on a human would have been a long-suffering sigh, and on a Threll was apparently something similar, and left before Marcus could suggest a slogan. It took approximately 9 days for the story to stop being a medical anomaly and start being a legend, in the specific way that stories do when they're too strange to stay contained to one training fleet. By day 3, cadets from other squads were finding excuses to walk past Medical Bay, just to look. By day 5, someone had nicknamed him Cactus, which Marcus adopted with far more enthusiasm than dignity required. By day 7, a junior Threll recruit asked, with painful sincerity, whether it was true that humans could survive being eaten, and whether this was a trait she should train for. No, Marcus told her. I got extremely lucky and the plant found me unappetizing. Please don't try to get eaten as training. HR would have a field day. Your species does not have an HR department that governs recreational predation avoidance, the recruit said, sounding genuinely troubled by this gap in human institutional structure. We really should, Marcus agreed. Director Asa Kryn's official incident report went through 3 revisions before Fleet Command would accept it, not because the facts were in dispute, but because the reviewing officer kept assuming the summary line. Human cadet survived extended internal exposure to Drevathorn digestive cavity via unknown resistance mechanism. Subject slept through incident, minimal injury sustained. Was some kind of clerical joke. It was not a joke. Asa resubmitted it, unedited, 4 times, with increasingly terse cover notes, until Fleet Command finally, grudgingly, updated the Standing Threat and Capability Assessment on Terran Physiology. The old assessment had read, fragile, cooperative, tactically valuable allies, caution advised regarding environmental hazard tolerance. The new assessment read, in its entirety, reclassification pending further study, do not attempt to predict what a human will survive. Marcus found Vex on the observation deck 2 nights before he shipped out for his next rotation, watching the last dregs of the storm season flicker distantly over the basin they'd both nearly died in. You saved my life out there, she said, without preamble, the way Threll tended to say the things that mattered most. You kept me from walking into a hole, earlier that same day. I think we're square. I have been trying to understand it, Vex said. Your species. We trained for months to survive Carvex 9. Threat assessments, drills, contingencies. You survived by falling asleep inside the one thing we were all specifically warned never to touch. Yeah, well. Marcus shrugged, watching the orange horizon. We're not built to be scary. Nothing about us screams apex predator. We're slow, we've got terrible night vision, we sunburn if we stand outside too long. Any actual monster on this planet could probably take one of us in a fair fight. Then how? We're not dangerous because we're strong, Marcus said. We're dangerous because we're annoying. Stubborn. We show up somewhere we shouldn't survive, and instead of dying like the paperwork says we're supposed to, we just don't. We take a nap instead. We complain about the itching. We wake up and ask what's for breakfast. Vex considered this for a long moment, crest shifting through a color Marcus still didn't have a name for. That, she said finally, is the single most Threll-illogical survival strategy one have ever encountered. Yeah, Marcus said, grinning at the storm-streaked horizon like it owed him money and hadn't paid up yet. That's kind of the whole species, honestly. We didn't evolve to win. We just evolved to be really, really hard to get rid of. Somewhere out past the ridge, the wind picked up again, and neither of them moved.